everybody. Good to see you again. Sorry it's been a little while since I've uploaded anything. Things changed a little bit. I've had to return to the office. As I may have mentioned before, I work in finance, so they're trying to have us sit back in the office for the old FaceTime. Don't really know that I agree with that, but it is what it is. So I haven't had as much time to make videos and upload things. I've definitely done some cool stuff. Took a couple cool trips over the summer. Right now we're right here at the end of July, about to be August, so did some really cool mountain trips, did some pretty awesome salamander hunting, found some cool stuff. So it's been a cool summer. Also spent a little time in Europe. I was in Greece doing some diving and some other things that I like to do now that we can start to travel again. Really want to get back to making some great videos, both informational, but also some videos on more builds and things like that. So we'll kind of just see as we go, but what I really wanted to do is just kind of give you an update on my amphibian room. As you know, I have had this amphibian room now for a couple of months and have kind of housed all my animals in there, and it's great. I just want to give you an update on all the tanks. As you may recall or may not recall, I'll just kind of walk through everything I have. So I have 3 arboreal salamanders. They're kind of in a tall exoterra type of vivarium, whatever you want to call it. I have 2 barred tiger salamanders in a paludarium. I also have 2 blotch tiger salamanders in a pretty big 75-gallon terrarium. I have 2 greater sirens, which is in a big 150-gallon aquarium with a big aquascape in it. I have 2 eastern newts in a 40-gallon breeder. I have 1 cave salamander in a 40-gallon breeder. I have 3 black chin red salamanders in a 40-gallon breeder. I have 1 northern red salamander in a 20-gallon tall tank. I have 2 North Carolina spring salamanders in a 20-gallon long, and then I have 1 northern spring salamander in a 20-gallon long. And then I have 3 green frogs that were tadpoles that have just morphed into little froglets in another 40-gallon breeder. And then lastly, I had a tank that I didn't have anything in for a while, and I never actually made a video of it. I hadn't had time, but I got 3 slimy salamanders, and they're wild caught because I don't know anybody who breeds them. They've been doing really well. They're really secretive though. I hardly see them. I mean, they come out at night. But I don't really see them in the daytime. So they're inhabiting the vivarium that I built, which was probably one of my last DIY upload builds. So that's kind of what the room consists of now. So what we'll do is we'll walk through, I'll kind of talk through successes and challenges I've had with each one of the tanks. And then talk about potential new builds that I'm thinking of, because I'm starting to run out of room. So probably only be a few more for the time being, but I'll walk through, like I said, some of the challenges, some of the successes, what's worked, what hasn't worked, how I've adapted things, and we'll go from there. One thing I will mention is that I probably, you may not see salamanders in every one of these. I'm not going to go through and pull them out so everyone can see them. I don't like handling them. If they're out, great. If not, then, you could look back at an old video where I actually film them, but you can at least see the tank and how they've adapted and what they look like now. So with that, let's get to it. And we're off to the races. And this is my first one that I will go to. This is a 75-gallon. It is using these Miss Kings I have. This is for my 2 blotch tigers. They've some of my oldest specimens. That's why I want to start here. I redid this terrarium / vivarium, whatever you want to call it, not too long ago, maybe 6 months ago. It used to have a water feature because I've had these tiger salamanders since they were larvae, water dogs, whatever you want to call them. A lot of the moss that I was using was more of the kind of moss that needed to be wet, and as you can see, a lot of the moss on the walls is now dry and dead. So what I've tried to do is replace some of the moss and even the plants. You can see some of the ferns look like they've died off. It's been pretty hard in here because I think there's just too much air circulation. But I've noticed a lot of new buds coming up on these ferns, as you can see right there. So I'm hopeful that these are turning around. So again, bird's nest ferns and a couple other types of ferns from the area I live in. I mean, they look kind of like Boston ferns. I'm not really sure what they're called, what they really are, but I've got this is the moss I was telling you about. This moss grows around my house, and it is a drier kind of moss. So I'm hoping that this will thrive in here versus the other mosses I had, because the other mosses just didn't do that great, except unless I was watering this excessively, and that was just too much for the salamanders. So I'm hoping that some of this new moss I have will take off. Oh, and as you can see, I did pull these guys out, not because I'm making a video, but because they haven't eaten in over a month. They typically will stay underground. Again, there's 2 blotch tigers in here. This one that's eating this worm is about 9 inches. The other one I have is closer to 11. Beautiful coloration, got that olive kind of black smattering. These are probably 2 of my favorites. I've had these for a long time, and really love these salamanders. They're so cool. They just, a lot of personality. They'll wait, when they are out, they'll kind of just sit by the glass and wait to see what I'm gonna do, see if they're gonna get a snack. This is the big one. This is King Kong. He is like probably over 11 inches, and he's just a beast. He's just foraging around, checking out the new moss I just put in there. Had a worm. Actually, I only gave him a half of a night crawler because he has just been chomping. And he just gets fat. Like, he'll eat anything I put in front of him, so I got to be really careful. But he's definitely a unit, as you can see here. But again, beautiful coloration, and he was actually my first one to morph when I had him. So he's been growing for the longest, I guess, in terrestrial form. But again, I think for the most part, the success of this vivarium has been evident in that the salamanders seem happy. They create underground burrows, except when I tear it up, obviously, to pull them out to eat. The only problem I've had is with the plants. And I think that, like I said, with the ferns, they're starting to do a little bit better. And I'm really hopeful that this moss will go a long way versus the other moss, because the other moss just needed too much water, and I was having to drain the false bottom all the time, and it was just too much. So really hopeful that this one will continue to kind of go in the right direction, as you can see. But it has been a little bit of a challenge, I won't lie, because of the moss and just too much air. And so we will see. But hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at the blotch tigers, and we will move on to the next salamanders. Next up here, I've got the tall Exoterra, which has my 3 arboreal salamanders. I've also got a Mist King hooked up, which waters this a couple times a day. And then I'm using another night crew light, as you can see there. This one's okay. I've also had moss die off in this one because I think there's just too much air circulation. I've put some liverworts, as you can see. I'm actually kind of systematically replacing the moss with liverworts because they grow better. There's one of the salamanders right there. He's pretty big. The other 2 are smaller, but not that small. I never honestly even really see them except at nighttime, or sometimes when I'll dump a bunch of crickets or other prey items in there. As you can see, the moss is just it was growing great, now it's just terrible. So I want to replace it with some of the liverworts I talked about and just kind of see how that goes. But the plants, for the most part, have done well. And so happy with the plants, except one of the ferns did die. But for the most part, everything else is okay. I replaced it with the creeping fig. This is actually where the other one lives, in this crack on the log here, the driftwood, I mean. So let's move on to the next. All right, third we have this 40-gallon breeder, which houses 2 eastern newts, red-spotted newts, whatever you want to call them. I've had these in my collection the longest. That is blackworms. There's a Mist King up there, which will miss this tank a couple times a day. This is one of my large rack here. Have a lot of plants, moss, liverworts, Java fern, Java moss. As you can see, there is one of them right there. He's looking, I guess blackworms have gotten out. I've got some narite snails in there that help with the cleanup crew. There's also some ghost shrimp around in here as well. This one really established. The other newt is right over there on the wall, actually, so you can see those today. They are both out. These guys, I feel like, always get pretty thin for some reason, and then they'll eat a whole bunch and look fat, and then so it's kind of weird. And by the way, they're escape artists, which is why I have the metal lid on this one. So this one gets dried out a lot, but I haven't watered quite a bit, so it's pretty good. As you can see, that's the Mist King. I also have another LED night crew up there, so it's not right over it, but a little bit higher up, which I like. It's not burning the plants. We got some ferns, golden pothos on the land, and I've
got it all taped off and foamed in the corners just so there's no escapes. So you can see the liverworts did really well, and this guy's planning his next escape, as you can see. But yeah, I've had these guys the longest. They're pretty easy to take care of, except for the eating. I feel like they're the most finicky eaters I have for some reason. But they seem to be doing well, and so, really enjoy watching them. They're always out and about. So let's move on to the next ones. So we're now looking at the 150-gallon greater siren aquascape. This has two greater sirens that are juvenile and growing. This one has been a challenge. As you can see, a lot of the moss has died off. There was so much duckweed in this tank that came in with other plants that it was blocking the light. That's some of the food there. There's pond snails, nerites, ghost shrimp, and some small fish. I forgot the name of them, but they're actually native to the U.S. and here. The rest of it's been pretty good. The plants are all right. There's a lot of floating plants still on the top. This one, I do almost a full water change every 2 weeks. Keeps it, there's a lot of this is almost like a black water tank, because this driftwood, even though I boiled it, it continues to release tannins. And so it's just between that and the brown algae, which is diatom, it's annoying. It gets the water pretty murky. Nothing unsafe, but as you can see, all those plants that are floating, a lot of them are actually supposed to be rooted to the bottom. These animals just bulldoze through everything and kick everything up. So that's one of the problems. So it's really hard to keep the plants in place with them. That's something I've noticed. As you can see, here's a shot. It's a little, the long ways looking, you can see how the water's tinted. And here's one of the greater sirens. I put some food out, so it's, you can actually kind of get a good look. It's pretty big, definitely over a foot, maybe about 18 inches at this point. They can get up to 3 feet long, so really excited to see how big these will get. Let's move on. Next up, I've got a 20-gallon tank. This houses 2 Carolina spring salamanders. They usually come out when I feed them, but I just fed them, so you will not see them. But a lot of vegetation in this tank's doing really well. So I've got a lot of plants in the water. I've got some dwarf sag and some other stuff, some water mosses and nerites for the cleanup crew. I've got a lot of creeping fig that's coming into the water, some liverworts and moss on the land, golden pothos. This one does pretty well, and there's also a bunch of springtails. They're always floating around. I try to simulate a stream, as you can see. I really like this one. I try to think where these animals live. And then next, beneath it, I have this is a northern spring salamander enclosure. A lot of moss, liverworts, ferns, creeping fig. Plants are doing well. I've got some water mosses. He usually hides right under that rock right there. But for the most part, there's going to be some algae in these things. It's never going to look completely perfect. But for the most part, this one's really thriving. I've had this for a long time too, for about a year now. I've got basically a drip wall. So this salamander is massive in here. It's about 8-9 inches long, something like that. I'd love to house them together and see if they breed, but they're 2 different subspecies, so I would never do that. But really like this one. It's really basically takes care of itself. Feed the animal every week or 2 with a night crawler. Let's move on. Moving on to the cave salamander setup, it's really turned out well. Unfortunately, 2 of the ones that I had, I talked about in an earlier video, died when I first got them. Wasn't sure why, but one is thriving in here. It is a 40-gallon breeder. Really like this one. I have some dwarf sage, flame moss, Christmas moss in the water. And then I also have a lot of these rocks, real rocks mixed in with the fake rocks that I made for the background. I think it looks really cool. Even put some blackworms in. I'm not sure if they eat them, if he eats them. But as you can see, that you get the moss coming right out of the water, growing up the side. Then I have the other terrestrial moss and the liverworts. I really like the liverworts more than the moss, to be honest. As you can see, here's the Mist King nozzle. Just have one in this one. I created a little, more liverworts, sorry. And then I created this little seepage here where the return is on the canister filter. So really like this one. Feed fruit flies, some really tiny worms, some black worms, and some small crickets, bigger than pinhead crickets, but the food seems to disappear, and I don't find any bodies anywhere floating around. So would love to show you this one, but I can't. But let's move on to the barred tiger salamander setup. This is also a 40-gallon breeder. I have Miss Kings on either side, as you can see. These two just really tear this one up a lot. So you can see in the water, I've got some nerites in the water doing the cleanup crew's job. I've got a bunch of, I forget what the plant is called, obegon or something like that in the water. And then I've got a bunch of ferns and some bird's nest ferns and some creeping fig. It's a little dirty there, but yeah, here's one of the barred tiger salamanders. Thinks I'm gonna feed him. The moss, I've had a challenging time in moss in this one too. My old one, before I redid it, I did not have a problem with moss. It was green all the time. It was great. I'm not really sure, again, if it's the air circulation or what, but I'm gonna try planting some drier moss in these areas. But these two definitely burrow a lot, so that's an issue. Moving on to one of my favorite is the green frog setup. I've got Miss Kings in this one too. As you can see, this is a 40-gallon breeder. I've got a lot of the obegon, whatever the kind of the grass is, of sweet flag, I think it's called. A lot of driftwood. There's one of the frogs. I had 3 tadpoles in here. All 3 of them are turned into green frogs. They're tiny. They're little froglets, so they're eating like small crickets and things. So you see there's moss kind of growing everywhere. Some of the plants died off, but some of the ribbon plants, bird's nest ferns doing well, and some of the creeping fig. A lot of the ferns died, unfortunately. Like a button fern I had died. But the water is, I have to change a lot. It was kind of, I think the driftwood was staining it, but really love this one. This is a really cool one. I'm gonna put some more lilies in here. As you can see, there's another frog right there. He's tiny. And then there's another one on the land somewhere. That's remnants of the button fern. But really like this one. This one turned out well. Have another canister filter hooked up. This is one of the frogs. Not sure what's going on with his legs. I don't know if it's a vitamin deficiency. I've tried. He eats a lot, so I guess it'll just be a handicap. I don't know. Hopefully his legs can straighten out. But other than that, he seems pretty healthy. The other 2 are completely normal. And yeah, really love this setup. Really excited to watch these green frogs grow. Okay, so this is the 40-gallon breeder that houses my 3 slimy salamanders. This is my latest DIY build that I had posted. The whole ground is covered in sheet moss, and it's all going really well. I've got other mosses, liverworts growing in here. I've got oak leaf creeping fig growing out of a couple places, several big ferns. And again, the moss is just kind of everywhere. It's taking off. I've got isopods and springtails as the cleaning crew. Also have a couple of worms in here and some crickets and some other things as well, some other creepy crawlies that they might eat. But this one's really, there's a big tree stump actually back there too. I think one of them lives under there. Really like this one. This one is really grown in. I actually had to go for about a month and a half, 2 months without putting anything in it. Just kind of really letting it get established and letting it cycle. Even had some mushrooms growing in here. These are hollow, so the salamanders can hide in there. They're only out at night. I rarely see them. But really like this vivarium. It's a really cool one. Really happy with the way it turned out. Again, I've got the Miss Kings on either side. I've got that LED NICREW light for plant growth. So really fun vivarium, this one. Moving on to my Pseudotriton ruber, which is a northern red salamander. I had a lot more moss in here, but I've been replacing it with liverwort. Liverwort seems to grow a lot better. I've got some nerites in the water for the cleanup crew, springtails on the land, oak leaf creeping fig growing in some spots. Again, moss, liverworts, a couple bare patches I need to patch up. Water's always pretty clear in here despite the debris. Really like this one. This is a 20-gallon tall tank, so not long. As you can see, the oak leaf has actually grown in to the water, and it's just kind of expanding. I'll have to probably trim it back. This one turned out really nice. Got to wipe the glass down a little bit. There was a fern there. It died a long time ago. Had some other clovers and things growing in here, but I cut them back. They were getting annoying. I was actually able to feed. I got a small earthworm here. And here is the salamander coming out. I knew he would come out to eat, and I hadn't fed him in about a week, so here he is. I've had him since a larva. He's great. He's getting pretty big. He's probably about 6 inches now. And he will snag this worm here because he always does, and he will drag it away. But yeah, this is probably like one of my favorite salamanders that I have. He's totally interactive, has learned how to feed, and moving on. This is another red salamander habitat. This is a Pseudotriton ruberschnecki, which is a black-chinned red salamander. Got lots of bird's nest ferns, oak leaf creeping fig, moss, liverworts kind of growing. There's a lot of algae in this one, which is annoying. That's been an issue. There's also a leak on the land side, so it's constantly, the false bottom is constantly draining into a bucket just so the roots don't get, there's no rot and anything on that, on the land side, and there's no, bad stuff going on in the water that will kind of poison everything. But as you can see here, I've got several drip walls in here going, kind of like a 75% of it. I've got a golden pothos, and then water is pretty clear usually, but they do have a green algae problem in here, so I have to do pretty frequent water changes. Have a couple aquatic plants, some dwarf sag, and a couple of some anubias, as you can see, which is not native, but I wanted to put it in here. And the golden pothos, actually under there is my last one that has not morphed yet. You can kind of see him right there. He's getting pretty big. He's the only one who is not morphed yet. The other two are completely terrestrial at this point. They utilize both the water and the land. I find them both places. They eat blackworms still, and then they also eat worms and crickets and stuff. But and as you can see, there's actually blackworms all over the bottom here, which is kind of gross, but it's actually good because they eat any kind of detritus or anything. And then the salamander eats them. So I'll try to show you. I'm not going to touch them because I really hate doing that, but I saw a bright spot of red. As you can see, they're really, really vibrant colors. More so, they're definitely brighter than their northern red cousins, the one that I just showed you, although they're both beautiful salamanders. These are a little smaller, and I'll get a better shot. As you can see, just super bright red, really, really cool salamanders. So there's two terrestrial ones like this on land. But anyways, that wraps it up. I will be doing some new DIY builds for some more salamander species, or maybe a frog, we'll see. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and thank you so much for taking the time. Sorry it's been so long. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy, and hope everyone's having a really fun summer. Definitely soak up this last month before things kind of get back in a full swing. And I will be back with some more builds. Thanks again, everyone.